Digital Week Online. I hope you enjoyed your 25-minute break and that you set your alarm and are back in your seat, ready to go. We had a great session right now. It's a long title, but I'm gonna read it. World Impact Tech, Man and Women for a More Sustainable Future. I can't think of a better topic as we slowly segue into 2021. I believe our host or sponsor is IXD Capital Impact, and represented by Ava Andriash. Ava, I do see you on Zoom, but it looks like I think you need to turn on your audio and video.
Yes. Eva Andriash is our CEO and co-founder. She's experiencing slight technical issues at the moment.
Got it. And Katerina, I think you're the woman in charge. I feel the power coming from you. So I am going to hand it over to you, my esteemed leader, put myself on mute and stop the video, and just wish you guys a very good panel. And I'll be watching. This seems like a very interesting topic. So I'm handing it to you, and have at it.
Thank you very much. Love your energy. Wow. Good evening or afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to welcome you here tonight for our panel for Digital Week Online on World Impact Tech, Men and Women in a More Regenerative Future. I am Ekaterina Sigulina of the Strategy and Business Development Department at IXD Capital. Our panel today is subdivided into two sections. First is for Men in Impact Tech, and the second one for Women in Impact Tech. It is my great honor to present you to our esteemed speakers, two speakers for each section. So for the first section, we have presenting Stuart Crane, co-founder at Barefoot Power, managing director at Village Infrastructure Angels, VIA for short, and David Solomon, co-founder at blueprints.org, co-creator at Financial Times. And for our next section and final section, we have Genevieve Levey, principal founder and CEO at AgriLedger. Genevieve Levey, innovative entrepreneur, global speaker, and 2019 Financial Times Top 100 BAME in Technology in UK, as well as 2020 FDM Every Woman finalist. And last but definitely not least, Anka Bogdana-Russo, Partnerships, Policy and Advocacy at C-Labs for International Finance Corporation, the World Bank. Undoubtedly, today we are all collectively going through a very turbulent and uncertain times. However, needless to say, every time great challenges also present us with great opportunities to create a very powerful momentum push towards a more sustainable, regenerative, and generally speaking, better future for all of us, as well as future generations. And we at IXD Capital remain 100% devoted to our mission of bringing together a close community of leaders of the impact business and innovation worlds, top-tier impact funds, as well as multilateral organizations. So without further ado, I think we can proceed and start with the first panelist for today, Stuart Crane, presenting his initiative, Village Infrastructure Angels. That is a project revolutionizing the traditional impact investment through the use of micro-infrastructure, microfinance, and technology. Stuart, you can take the floor.
Katerina, and thank you, Eva, and everybody else for this opportunity to present some of our work to the global audience. I've been working in village electrification and renewable energy for about over 20 years, starting with microhydro mini grids in Nepal, and then moving on to large-scale wind farms. Started one of the first solar LED lighting companies, Barefoot Power, in 2005 through to 11, and since 2012 has been running Village Infrastructure Angels, trying to bring more advanced uses of solar and solar microfinance to more households in developing countries. So our focus, as you can imagine, is the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 7, access to energy, but also under a broader umbrella, the access to water, agriculture, and other micro infrastructure, which is a term that's not really been recognized yet. We're trying to work on that in the way that microfinance was something new and crazy in the 70s and 80s, and then has grown now to be a $100 billion industry. So we think that small-scale micro infrastructure can probably actually do something similar. I'm going to share my screen a little bit with you all to bring up a PowerPoint with a few slides that help to guide the discussion. So we envisage that there's an overlap between the rapidly growing microfinance industry that has served the poorest 1 or 2 billion people on the planet, and infrastructure, which so far has mostly been big and is much bigger than microfinance, which is about $180 billion per year, but infrastructure $9,500 billion per year. If you take away real estate, which I think is its own category really, maybe it's more like 4,000, 5,000 billion, still huge. And plenty of room for unicorns if we can look at that kind of overlap. As you can see, very common needs of the SDGs are covered there: power, water, communications, social infrastructure, better transport.
Are you sharing already?
I am sharing, but it would appear to have not shared by the sounds of that. Sorry, I forgot to hit the share button.
Oh, okay. We can see it now.
Sorry about that. Still getting used to all these wonderful technologies. So yeah, very quickly there on the left-hand side, you can see 180 billion for microfinance. Well, 180 million people reached, 146 million assets under management, and power, water, telecom, social infrastructure as elements of infrastructure. These can be applied to the poor as well. People who build large power stations, airports, and toll roads are probably not that well suited to serving the poor billion, but there is a big market there. And this has been recognized by various studies. The amount of estimates of investment required are in the trillions for meeting the SDGs, with a financing gap of 2.5, of which infrastructure is estimated to be about 1 trillion by 2030. That's at least $100 million a year. Sorry, $100 billion per year, 2030. So pretty huge possibility there. We believe the same, and we've broken down that market in terms of the minimal amount of access required for energy, water, transport, all the things that we believe make up micro infrastructure, to get in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Exact numbers not important, but you can see the cost of a solution per person is quite modest for these amounts. So that brings us to impact investing. How do we do it? How do we get out there? Well, the venture capital business model is that you invest in 3/4 of the companies that go bust or have no return, a few of the living dead, and 1 out of 10 companies gets 95% of your capital. That probably sucks as an investment model, excuse my French, for reaching the poor. We're probably not going to have too many IPOs, trade sales, and management buyouts at the bottom of the pyramid. We will have some unicorns, it's true. You can copy and paste this model into some markets, like East Africa. But if you go out into the Pacific Islands, the market size just isn't there. You need to rethink it. This is not the to solve the problem. And most of the problem, let's face it, is going to be debt finance, not equity. So on our website, you'll see we don't do equity. We're just not interested in the classical VC model. It's got too much risk of losing money, and we don't think the exits will actually be there. So we take a very active approach in delivering supplier credit over the long term, 1 to 5 years, and maybe later years, to villages. This can also work with Islamic microfinance in Islamic countries where we participate in the supply chain. And instead of sending cash out as investments, we send product. So we actually buy the materials, we demonstrate clear ownership over that, and literally we're almost like a project developer. So we're much more interested in project finance rather than corporate finance. We don't want to buy shares in people. We want to build projects and get the infrastructure built that needs to be built, and then bring the money back to the investors. We believe that also small micro infrastructure, as is already happening in the Western market with grid-connected residential solar and things like that, is disrupting large centralized infrastructure. That $3 trillion or $4 market is under attack. And a lot of the things that we can do across hardware, software, and finance can actually scale up in a big way, not just from developing countries, but even into richer countries as well. So I think the microinfrastructure revolution is not just for developing countries that may be working from a blank slate of having very little. It's happening in the West as well. So that's pretty exciting to look at this possibility of a lot of different technologies there that I won't go into one by one. So what do we do on the ground? How does this hit the road? So we combine hardware, software, and financial products all together. We don't just concentrate on one. And we, here we go, I can reduce that a little bit. We believe that this can be a specialist subclass of an accepted alternative asset class infrastructure, micro-infrastructure, where we can have specialist investors who really understand this and have deep knowledge in the technical and financial aspects. So a lot of impact investors are ex-bankers and do not have a lot of technical knowledge about solar-powered milling, which we helped invent about 5 or 6 years ago because we saw a market gap that no entrepreneur was filling. So sometimes we're an investor, sometimes we're an entrepreneur. Stick the entrepreneur's hat on and make things. We complement lights, solar lights with solar mills and centralized village scale infrastructure, as well as consumer level infrastructure. And we touch on a lot of different SDG goals here, not just affordable energy. A lot of our projects are run by women with quality, and we touch on many other things as well. We're aiming to return 5 to 15 rates of return. I've returned 10 to 12% on every bit of debt investment I've taken since 2005 for 15 years, right through the GFC, right through the coronavirus crisis. So we actually believe there's stability in poverty. Whatever happens with the rest of the world as it blows up, there. And we feel that you can have different types of return to mix and choose from. You can just be a pure black financially investor here. We put some color codes here where you want your capital and interest. You can be like Kiva and be impactful where you want your capital back, but you forego the interest. You can be environmental, you can be green and take carbon credits as your return, or you can be, maybe gold and have a societal impact where you're looking for economic returns, venture philanthropy being a kind of example there. The role of digital technologies is very important that we have touched on in various parts of our work. We're looking at sensor data coming back to measure the actual real-time business data and the impact data of what's happening out there in the field and putting that onto dashboards via ERP systems that not that many that are really truly built for sustainable development goal focused companies that have high volumes of customers. We're using zero accounting, for example, and it just suffers badly with lots of customers. We've developed quite a few products that actually generate quite a lot of revenue for us for spatial data analysis using GIS cloud-based services. That could be a presentation unto itself, but we don't have time for it. Part of it is geolocation, mapping where 1 to 2 billion people are on the planet that have never been mapped before, where their households are, where their villages are, and then working out appropriate infrastructure solutions that suit the spatial density that we find that they're in. And that can change from solar home systems to mini grids to grid extension and various like that. And then we need to look at the revenue side of things. Mobile money is very exciting and has helped the solar home system industry grow where GSM networks exist, but it doesn't exist for about 20% of the market. And we see that quite a lot in our own projects. So we do use mobile money a little bit, but it isn't a complete solution for everybody. And the last slide down there, digital divide communication solutions, getting satellite data and internets, balloons, LoRaWAN can help meet the needs of getting those last 20% online. Once you map where people are, digital identity is important as well. You start to give them an address, a location. One day we might be able to do land boundaries and they could borrow against that land, which has helped the West get rich as well. Digital solutions for crowdfunding is important, and even the hardware. Lighting itself became digital about 20 years ago, which is something I've worked with for a long time now. And there's other parts of it as well. I've got a solid state hard drive on my computer now, making things faster and better. So there's a huge range of digital technologies that we need help with, to be honest, to take advantage of these in their maximum way for SDG solutions. A very quick final part here. What has been the impact of what some of the projects have been that we've rolled out to 10,000 households so far across 3 countries? We've seen the manual time that women mostly are using to process crops decrease by 80 or 90% by having access to the world's first solar mills. We estimate there's around 100 billion hours per year that are used by women to process crops manually, and that time could be spent in other ways. We've helped reduce expenditure on kerosene lamps, on traveling to mills, on various other things. And people that were buying 2 or 3 litres per week of kerosene lighting or batteries or candles or the equivalent has now doubled up to over 70% of households who are now spending nothing on fuel-based lighting, which is screamingly inefficient. And alternatives can pay back in as little as 1 or 2 years. We're also seeing from the time savings of productive uses of solar and evening lighting of solar, of LED, that people now do more things after dark because they can. And a lot of that is actually related to studying, as you can see. It's also related to social activities, but it's also related about 30% to income generation. So this has seen quite a marked shift in those things, and not all of them will give a financial return to an investor. Some of them are an economic or a social return, which is sometimes not captured in simple business plans. So we've seen about 30% of customers reporting a 15 to 30 month increase in income from 30 hours saved per month. Time does equal money, even for the poor. And we estimate that the value of that can be around 50 cents to $1 per hour. And the cost of saving that time is only about 5 cents. This is a 10x return we're interested in. Not so much in a 10x return for ourselves, but for our customers. So the economic IRR that we're seeing for customers is very high, up around 30 or 40%. They spend $100 or $200 on the services, but they save many hundreds more from reduced expenditure and increased income, with a net benefit of around $100 to $200 per year. The trick of impact investing for me, after quite a few years of doing it, I think, is balancing the economic return for the customer with the financial return for the investor. Try and get all of that net benefit for yourself as an investor and leave nothing for the customer, and you're going to have a problem. Have too much return for the customer and not enough return for the investment, and you're going to have a problem. You need to balance it. And, you know, in those net benefits is a pretty good guide. So that's us. villageinfrastructure.org.com, whichever one you like. We've actually changed a little bit from .org in the early years to .com in the later years. And feel free to reach out to me directly if you would like to learn more about what we're doing. We'd love to have more people involved helping us with the digital challenges that we've got involved in this project. So,
thank you very much for your presentation. I especially love how you put such an emphasis on providing full cycle solutions, because sadly, as you mentioned, there is certain stability to poverty and to the fact that it comes entwined with other global challenges as well. So I think that's a very important point. Are there any comments, questions, suggestions on the floor for Stuart? Okay, thank you again. It was very insightful. And now we're going to move on to David Solomon, presenting his initiative, United Planet, powered by Seed Currency. It is an initiative created in order to connect local farmers with end consumers with the purpose of solving hunger locally while remaining globally scalable. So David, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Katarina, and Stuart, thank you also for a very insightful presentation. If it were not for the fact that we just did a big thing for World Food Day with 30 people, I would be deeply engaged in the minutiae of that. So a quick background on myself, where to start? Well, my father is indigenous from North Africa, from Berber side, and my mother's side was from Syria and Egypt, and moved to England at a young age, and pretty much had to fight for everything. Went through economics, international relations, and into banking, investment banking, like many people do. Got disillusioned with the investment banking world, and then went out on a 10-year journey to really find what does life mean and everything, and pushed myself really to the edge of trying to understand all of that. Was working in mostly in Indonesia at the time, on the other side of the spectrum with orphans. And when you started to care for the orphans, then suddenly you tried to make the village sustainable and the agriculture, because otherwise they're dependent. And then you realized the village was getting screwed because the local mining group was poisoning the river, and the kids were coming out like God deformed. And before you know it, you were dealing with larger systemic problems. My career from there led me to the independence of South Sudan. And at that time, I was advising the head of state, President Salva Kiir, and the vice head, which was Dr. Riek Machar. We were trying to help them with Israel's startup nation model. President Peres was guiding at the time, and he said famously to him, he said, so President Kiir turned and said to him, he said, as a nation that rose from the dust, as the few who fought against so many, you have given a future and an economic prosperity to all your children. He said, show us, teach us. And strangely enough, South Sudan had more resources it had more land, it had everything. But it was such a young nation, and I saw the greed of one or two men tear down that country. Not the president, actually, it was businessmen. I literally saw it with my own eyes. And I saw that lead into a famine. I saw that lead into the genocide that happened. And I saw this pattern repeating again and again as we worked to establish economic justice in different regions and to establish an underlying business model that could compete with the very extractive old colonial model that essentially had continued to reiterate itself. And what we found actually was a lot of these regions, particularly one in North Uganda called Karamoja, they were sitting on several $100 billion of resources, but the people were going through famine after famine. And there was this tremendous dependency on aid that had been created, and it was almost impossible to bring funds into there because you had to vie against Google that was saying it was a dust bowl and everyone's going to die and it was such a catastrophe, but this really wasn't the truth. This had all the potential of being a great nation. And so I went through this for about 10 years, building things like the first Financial Times Global Impact Summit, going to the World Economic Forum for 8 years until I was absolutely exhausted. Exhausted because it wasn't for a lack of clear-cut financial models. It was really, people were just investing into the same thing again and again and again. And so at the end of last year, we were awarded, after working for Indigenous people for a long time, the World Indigenous Forum. And we started the year and we were so happy. We were so happy. We had 2.6 million in revenue from global events. And I think you know what was about to happen. In March, we got the call and all our main sponsors, Google, Facebook, Shopify, Cisco, all these people canceled. And suddenly we had a 300 grand bill. And so you quickly went from crossing the finishing line at the end of a marathon to being punched in the chest and just being like that. By June, many of us in that world really had suffered tremendous setbacks. And we started communicating and we started coming together and we said, look, what do we do different? And so we said, we're going to break down the silos. We're going to break into challenges and we're going to gather together. And so the presentation I'm about to show you, finally, is the presentation of United Planet. This is very much for illustration purposes at this stage. And we just got off our call with the World Food Day, which is groups like the World Food Program, Social Gastronomy Movement. All of them are looking for a roadmap that's implementable at the grassroots. And so here we go. We start to share from here. And so we're looking at how 12 key members, and as I say, this is for illustration purposes at this stage, how 12 key members can start to come together to iterate around a model that will be underpinned by both an existing technology structure. Stuart was saying there are some amazing technologies out there that aren't being integrated, incredible technologies, and how we are able to break this down into the parts where it can be achievable. So this is the harrowing image that I grew up with and many of you grew up with, which is no less upsetting now. But 35 years ago when we watched Live Aid and we were told, you know, we saw millions of people singing and hearing the music and we are the world, we are the people, and it was all going to change and the money was being sent over there. But we realized after decades of aid, we just created dependency. We'd not taken them out of this. And personally, I had witnessed this in such a way that the scars of famine, they haunt me to this day. Sometimes I break down in tears. I wake up in the night screaming. Why? Because fundamentally, when you move past this model, you actually start to see economic models that are incredibly powerful and are starting to be deployed. And the exciting news, after telling you some very hard failures and some very hard things, is that this is happening. We are prototyping and scaling. We are getting ready for something very, very exciting. And so the big question that we've been asking ourselves is, how can we empower the collective intelligence of millions of citizens to solve zero hunger and create abundant food for all? And we've been asking it from a 10-year perspective from now. And so this is a note from a Venezuelan farmer and many others around the world who've, been left on the edge of suicide, but also seeing the opportunity for a real renaissance. And so unlocking the power of collective intelligence, it really does happen at the grassroots. So a few hours ago, we were with the social gastronomy movement, and we were working with them on aligning some of the leading global partners around how this model begins to empower citizens at the local level, at the grassroots. So you're familiar with the problem, and the problem, as we all know, is one that is inherent. It's hundreds of years old. It's thousands of years old in some ways. We pay homage to suffering, and we profit very much from a food system which leaves 822 million people hungry. So, oh, you can't see my camera for some reason, but anyway. Oh, there I am. Maybe not. Let me just 1 second. Am I there? Starts video. Ah, there we are. You couldn't see me. It was just
here.
Oh, there we go. So we can't paint over this old canvas. We just can't do it. But we're at a crossroads at the moment with this warning shot across the bow. We're at a crossroads where we can create the new paradigm. And what we're seeing is the seeding of civilizations of intent that are developing all across the developing world, and in exciting places as well, like Costa Rica, Bali, Ibiza. They're not all like in conflict zones. And this was today. This was a few hours ago. We were future casting with these leaders, and we were gathering their intelligence in order to create a roadmap. And this roadmap essentially is to enable us to be able to work essentially towards a collective vision. So if you imagine in 2030, you imagine that we've mapped out both existing and future food systems, and we can see what that looks like in a game on a planetary grid. And I say a game, and it's very important, a game, because the willingness has been there for a very, very, very long time amongst people. What has been lacking has been the infrastructure that connects us in many ways on a technological level. We all plug into these dopamine feedback loops. The world's biggest sport is football. It's 3.7 billion people that watch that. But the world's biggest religion is food. I grew up Jewish, and half of the Old Testament is a cookbook. And so what you see here is we're doing a model with some of these groups where people are going to essentially donate or buy one meal. So you give up one meal a month. But we're not asking them to sacrifice anything. The whole model is underpinned by, in the systems world, that we've been observing thousands of currencies, and there's one that's emerging as the most trusted one, as the one that we have no stake in this currency. But essentially what it will provide for people is a 33-fold return in the currency over a period of time, but the actual investment, the money, will be a perpetual evergreen reinvestment structure. And these groups are aligning essentially so that the best solutions in the world, the best yields, the best seeds, the best projects, the best organizations, the best games, the best of the best at the farmers level are going to go into league tables so that they can be scaled. Here's some of the work so far. This is the underlying infrastructure of a regenerative economic system called seeds. It's completely built, and many of our organizations are plugging in. It's a holacracy, which means there is nobody to go after. Nobody owns it. It is essentially completely decentralized, and we don't have a share in it. But what we like about it is that it can drive massive growth both on the investment side and on solving the challenge. So I'm going to skip past this part. Essentially, this is how different groups plug in. This is how we get to a powerful toolkit that democratizes change. This is how you go from left and right swiping to actually doing things that add to your thumbprint each morning. And so we looked at movements of youth and how they could get up, instead of looking at Instagram, how they could participate in something that is of purpose, in building their futures, and participating in things that really get involved both locally and globally. And so in all of this, this does not belong to us. Anyone, any organization can plug in, even organizations as big as Amazon. And we looked even with governments and conscription programs where people will give part of their time, their resource, or their money, and they'll plug in, and there's rewards and incentive structures, and it's all starting to be gamified. So what is the investment? The total funding required, though we believe at this point we can do it for a lot less, because people are pitching in with resources, which is vastly reduced to 7.5 million needed. 7.5 million was an analysis with KPMG that we did in project that was essentially, how do we trigger this whole model? They estimated that we would basically unlock this key breadbasket in Africa and set up a model which would attract a total of about 2.2 billion in funding from the initial 7.5 million in funding into the model. That 2.2 billion would be deployed at key lever points within the food system, within seeds, genetics, within local scalability, that would actually be able to create a perpetual model to solve hunger. But the investment is far simpler than that. It really is actually very simple. Everything to do with hunger is perpetually reinvested. So nobody gets to touch that. So thank you. It's about the challenge. They make their money on the underlying currency. The underlying currency only needs to take in a total of 43 million of project capital to go from 3 cents to this full dollar valuation. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, I have no stake in their company, that they're going to do it. And it's going to be very exciting, the process. And I will say as well, I do not have equity in this. I'm taking an income on purpose. Everything else gets reinvested into the solving of hunger. So I take the income that apparently creates the net happiness. We'll talk about that another time. But anyway, what I'll say about this is, not only does it's taken 8 years, there are deep business models and packages under this, 56 pages long of business plans and everything else, and McKinsey types of models. There's some solid mathematics and fundamentals behind this, and this really is just, it's just an incredible, I think it's the way that people will be investing to solve challenges in the future. And so I thank you for your time. And I really appreciate the chance to share this with you. I hope in some way it's been of benefit.
Thank you to you very much, and for your enthusiasm presenting as well. I love it. I actually have a question. So this model that you described, it's a strong emphasis on the grassroots, bottom-to-top approach, right? Do you think once this model takes off, it will be able to replace the traditional governmental development aid altogether, or is it an alternative to that, or rather a complement to that?
Absolutely, that's a very good question. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is, when we started with, there's two key people here who I would say are key voices. Dambisa Moyo wrote Dead Aid in this particular area about how $2.3 trillion has gone into aid, and the existing problems continue. We ran our first ever Financial Times Summit with, you name it, was there. Mm-hmm. And it was how to shift from aid to development. And fundamentally, even the aid agencies were saying, and even the World Food Programme was saying, look, we want economic systems that work at the grassroots. And the mathematics, I'm a mathematician, statistician background. And one of the amazing things that we found about the mathematics is that when you take a peer-selected portfolio at the grassroots, okay, 100 projects, it has to be a sample population of 100 or more, the average annualized return is 27.3%. Now that's a staggering figure. Just bear with me just for a second. 27.3%. The Berkshire Hathaway was 24.9% per annum over 40 years, one of the world's largest investment firms. And 27.3% doesn't sound like much, but $10,000 over 20 years turns into $1.249 million. Okay, so it's a big difference once you compound, as Einstein says, the great magic. But that's the beauty. The mathematics at the grassroots is not debatable. Kiva has shown models like this. Others have shown models. So when we invest there, we do two things. We trigger the grassroots, we build the communities, but second of all, you're dealing with the richest people on the planet. Some of the most vulnerable people are sitting on some of the world's largest resources. And for every dollar in aid that goes into these countries, $24 comes out. This is the GFI and the Norwegian Institute wrote about this. Think about that for a second. For every dollar Africa receives in aid, we're stealing $24. Africa is not poor and in need of saving. She is rich and in need of empowering.
Yeah, well, couldn't agree more. That's convincing. I'm actually curious to see how your perspective might intersect with Genevieve's presentation. She's going to share her story working with in Haiti, reaching the bottom percent of the population that mostly happens to be smallholder farmers, and applying blockchain technology to optimize the value chain and redistribute risks in order to allow the smallholder farmers to actually harness the value of the goods produced. And so, Genevieve, whenever you're ready, if there are no comments or questions for David here.
Thank you, Katerina. And
Thank
you, Genevieve. I really appreciate this.
Thank you very much, Solomon. That was very, very inspiring. And I'd like to take it a little further. I would love to exchange numbers because we have a way, we're actually starting to think about how to realize the actual wealth that Africa has. I don't know if you guys are aware of Ralph Semi from the IMF. He has just come out with a number of papers which talk about the carbon footprint and the carbon credit that is created by the African elephant, or any elephant, or the whale, or the what's it called? Sorry, it's a bit late. The sharks. And if we can actually create a valuation against those, and you talk that each elephant is worth 1.7 million in its lifetime, how do you create a fund which then looks at using that for the carbon credit? And so I am going to take you guys through what I have been doing in Haiti for the last 2 years. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, this Zoom thing is not loving me today. Share. I don't know why it's not letting me share screen. Sorry. Yes, here it is. I hope you can see now my screen. Thank you so much. So I am going to talk about how distributed technology is being used for the green economy revitalization and what we have been doing with it, and we hope to also look to implement furthermore. So for those of you who may have heard of Haiti, many a time what is heard about Haiti is really the hurricane, the earthquake, and all the negative things that have happened. And the pictures that you see is a devastated country rather than the beauty that Haiti is. And for those who are not aware, Haiti was the first of the Antilles uncovered by Christopher Columbus on his quest for India. He found what was to be called the West Indian. The land is very lush and green. And for many years, it also was the catalyst to the wealth of France and England and Spain, and accounted for about 40% of the GDP of France. As a result also of this, this actually was after Napoleon reneged on the idea of the freedom of all men, equality of all men. The former slaves revolted, because what had happened was that the plantation owners started saying, well, you know, by giving them their freedom, they want to be paid for the work they're doing. So could you please change the law? And when he tried to change the law, Haiti became the first and ever Black nation to win her independence as a result of war, and also paid very dearly for that, not only from the fact that France enacted a 40 million at the time value in terms of payment. Of course, I would do, if you were 40% of my GDP and I just lost all my sugar and coffee and cocoa, I was going to make you pay for that. But also what happened is that if we think of the trade routes at the time, you would have a small boat from a country like that, bring it to Savannah, and from Savannah, have it go to Europe. Well, 1776 was when the US gained her independence, and it was several years later that the US actually abolished slavery. So therefore, for about 100 years, Haiti was closed down. So that meant no trade, no ability to actually create money, and still were paying money back to France. Now, today, we again have a lot of unrest and instability, which are really due to governance more than anything else. Around the 1980s, 90s, when Venezuela was flush with cash, what Venezuela did was to allow other Caribbean nations in the CARICOM area to withhold 30% of the payment back, with the idea, and it was in good faith in terms of trying to gain friends and influencers against the US, in another way that money was supposed to be used for infrastructure. However, as you have in many places where there is lack of governance, the money did not go to help the people or create ability to create new roads and new infrastructure, and rather went into the pockets of many which were part of the government. So as such, where we in the world are now suffering from this lockdown and having to contemplate a secondary restriction on our freedom of movement, Haiti has been going through this since 2018. Starting November 2018, and intermittently, I can actually say from September 2019 till, 2019 to January 2020, no one could move. So we actually built a system, deployed a system, tested a system via Zoom and WebEx. So finally, in February, we were able to go on the ground and actually put it in. Now, that also drives the economic reality. When you have so much unrest and so much lack of certainty, the economic expectation are mostly driven via this whole aspect of remittances. And I know that the IMF and the World Bank had been predicting that with, at least with the first bout of the pandemic, a sharp decrease in the ability of remittance to be sent. Haiti has about 28% of its GDP tied to remittance. And that also has a double whammy effect, because not only does it serve the people in terms of being able to buy food, which, by the way, is not bought locally, but bought from the US or from the rest of America. But also, this is a mechanism by which, or usually remittance, are used by central bank to actually support being able to have investment and also borrowing. So it's really, the whole idea of remittance is not only good for the people, but it's also good for the government and the central bank. Now, these whole issues and challenges really drives you to this idea of how do you create better governance, and also how do you create a trust, because P2P does work, but part of what missing sometimes in the P2P aspect, mostly when it comes to commerce, is really how do you do this exchange of value? So even though we are tackling what could be seen as supply chain, really what we are addressing is this whole exchange of value, and how do you reorder, for lack of better word, the whole value chain. Now, when you look at blockchain technology, it has many places that you can see it being fitting. And there has been, in my point of view, a reliance more toward the idea of financial transactioning. There is still this idea of transactioning, because what we have to remember, a bank is not about giving money. A bank is about giving trust that an action that is to be taken is based either on a contract or a reaction. Based on those reactions, only then do you have a transaction. I should have told you, I have about 25 years in banking and also treasury management, having worked for some of the largest banks in the world and some of the largest corporations, which are GE and Hewlett Packard. So I've seen what it is to try to create infrastructure across multiple entities, multiple global, and having everybody look to collaborate together. So we look, for us, and let's say for me, when I was looking at blockchain, I saw the ability to get to straight through processing, and also to create this transactioning based on action and reaction and data. So the mechanics of what we're doing in Haiti is very simple. A farmer is seen, visited through knowledge, also told, would you like to partake in this program? There is no coercion, but he needs to be registered. He's also will say how many trees he's got in his house, on his backyard. So I don't like to call them farmers. Usually I call them producers, because this might be a guy with 5 trees in the back of his house. And I should also premise this to say this project is not about just alleviation of poverty. It's about creating entrepreneurship from the participants so that they understand, and also through that understanding, de-risking the value chain. Because in the process before, they felt at the bottom, not in control, therefore handing their goods to somebody who was giving them a pittance. Now they're no longer selling, they are entrusting their goods down the value chain all the way to the foreign market. So those who participate, and this is the redrawing of roles and responsibilities, those who participate, the drivers, the transformation, the transportation, all of those are not, even the government are providing a service to them. And for that service, there's an agreed amount that will be paid, or a share that will be basically distributed to that individual. And the farmer, as a result, is the one. So he calls, he doesn't need a smartphone, he just uses his phone, or he sends an SMS to the location to say what he's going to have, when does he believe, and he receives a message telling him where to come with his good, or when somebody will be coming to help him harvest. When he comes in, he signs a contract. And by the way, the contract is, he is giving those individuals the ability to transact on his behalf, the broker in the US to sell the goods on his behalf, the broker in the US to clear and to pay whatever transportation are needed, and then for the bank to pay everyone according to what the system has calculated, and then the difference is to come to him. So what we did in Haiti was, and by the way, forgive me for going back. This is a young man, I'd say probably about 13 to 14 years old. This is a picture that I took in June last year. And in my estimation, at the time of that picture, he should have been in school. Also, the way by which he's carrying those mangoes probably by the time they get to market, they will be absolutely destroyed. And just so you know, that mango in the US, if I can find it, because has only 40% been met, is about $5 each. But he is probably going to get, I'd say, $2-3 for his work for that day. So what we did in during the pandemic, and I am happy to report that the project went on live on May 1st. It should have gone live before, but as we all know, life as we knew it was absolutely changed, and there were challenges as to when to be able to get it moving because I wasn't sure if they were going to be having the FTAs, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, in 8 weeks, there were 6 runs, 38,000 kgs of mango were harvested for about 60 plus 62 producers. About 23,000 of that sold at the rate of 40,000. The price differential of what was available on market, if they had sold it, was 750% differential. So 14 cents to what they received was 186. Of that 40,000, they received 68%. So it paid the broker all the fees which were for transportation. Plus, that meant that during the time where many of us were struggling financially in the mountains of Haiti, in Gros Mon, you had farmers which were to receive $28,000 cash. Now, as a result of this, the mango, Haiti, and actually this afternoon, I spent my afternoon going through this, the Haitian government and the World Bank have put together the first ever commercial exportation of avocados from Haiti. And what we're looking to do is to be able to go from the field to where you have messages going to the farmer, telling him in his language when to come, when it's been received in Port-au-Prince, when it's arrived to the US, how much did it sell for, and finally, how much will he be receiving in his account of choice. At the time of his bringing the fruits, he can decide if he wants it in cash, if he wants it in mobile money, or if he wants it to be delivered to him in a wire. Finally, the customer will have on each fruit a QR code which lets him be able to tell where did the fruit come from, when was it harvested. Actually, I was in a conference with someone the other day in Rotterdam, and they had an avocado, and we hadn't talked. We were both on the same panel, but he was talking about avocado, and he had an avocado he said, I know this avocado was picked 2 months ago. Now imagine, now you as a customer are going to be able to be told when that avocado was picked and when it got to you. But I think what's also very important is to let the customer, I don't know about you, mostly now I find that I don't know what to do. I kind of look at it and I said, okay, how am I going to use this food now? So you can start connecting with individuals. And the idea is to create for the customer the information where they can tell who's the person who harvested, what's the nutritional, and just in case you don't know, what it said is your avocado, zabukapao. So this way, and we can even, because not only are we tracking the goods, so temperature, because it's very important, the temperature, the humidity, how long did it take from point A to point B, were those respected? And finally, what we also are able to do is understand every cost that has gone through the system. So we can even tell to the customer what is going to the producer and what is going to each part of the value chain. You can imagine that also gives you the green, the carbon credit, all that information, because we can tell how it's going through. So communication, of course, are some of the challenges, and that means working across communities, both the youth, which is involving them so they can start understanding what is distributed ledger technology, blockchain, and not thinking that it is just this cryptocurrency, but information that gives you real data. And then also the community. because when you're creating those influx of money into those communities, so my view is that this is about creating trade, creating ability to have money come back, and that has different effect, because then you're now giving them more power to buy, and even for their government to be able to have money coming in rather than borrowing money to buy food. So the next step is really marketplaces. How do you get direct, remove some of the auxiliary sort of intermediaries? What we look to do is to remove, as you will always have intermediaries, but you need to make sure that everyone in the value chain understands their role and brings in value to that chain. And finally, what is most important is standards. So we talk a lot about quote unquote data on the blockchain. There are certain organizations which I feel, mostly in the food supply chain, which are very clear to say we put certain information into the blockchain. Versus for me, I see this as an infrastructure play. The blockchain is the infrastructure. We're then looking at other aspects such as AI, machine learning, to really start bringing in knowledge at those levels. And knowledge need not be complex. It is information to help people how to improve. So thank you very much. I'm Geneviève, and should you have any question, I am more than happy to support and help. Thank you.
Geneviève, thank you very much. Actually, as a general customer myself, I'd love to have something like that available to me as well. So now we're gonna move on to our final panelist for today, Anka, who's gonna tell us, actually she's gonna add more to the point of how blockchain technology needs to be distant from just this connotation of cryptocurrency and can be applied and should be applied and is widely applied already for the shared prosperity. Showing the initiatives and the platform, the microwork platform, Earn, as well as cash transfer system Give by CLabs. Anka.
Thank you, Katerina, for that. It's always an honor, a little bit intimidating to follow Geneviève on panels, but I'll try to match it up. Let me see if I can share my screen and jump quickly into the presentation. Oh, come on. I guess not. Let's try again. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Can you see the presentation, or am I just...
Now we can see the presentation, yes.
Okay. Oh, great. I think that's much better. Great. So again, thank you so much for the intro, and I'm gonna start going through this. I'm Anka. I'm part of the team at CLabs working on Cello, and you have my contact info there for any sort of questions. I've been with the CLabs team for almost 2.5 years now, and spent the previous 8 working at the World Bank and IFC on financial inclusion and digital finance. And a big appeal for me at a time of deciding to join what was a team of less than 8 people at a time with CLabs was really this mission that they had, that really of building an open blockchain platform with the mission of shared prosperity. We started by doing extensive research in emerging markets ranging from the Philippines, Tanzania, Colombia, Mexico, Kenya, Sierra Leone, and really this led to building a mobile-first blockchain platform alongside a suite of financial tools accessible to really anyone with a basic smartphone. And in order to deliver on the promise, the platform features both innovative technology, an alliance of now over 100 organizations from around the world that work with us, and and a really, really deep focus on real life use cases. When I talk about, went very fast. When I talk about the technology, I wanted to go very briefly over the technology that powers our platform. And unlike a number of other projects out there, which is not something very common in the blockchain world, is really took a full stack approach. And so the C Labs team really built both the platform itself, which is an open cryptographic protocol that allows applications to make transactions and run smart contracts, as well as the additional layer of smart contracts that run on the blockchain itself, and really comprise a lot of the logic that enables the features of the platform, from stable currency to digital identity attestations, proof of stake, governance. And these smart contracts are upgradable, and they're managed by a decentralized governance process. One of them, incidentally, is the one that computes the estimation of how much energy is being used to validate all of the transactions that are going on the blockchain, and make sure that those are paid out in rewards to carbon offsetting projects. And as of last week, Cello is actually the first project of its kind to be carbon negative, where more rewards have actually been paid than energy that has been consumed to run the platform. And then last but not least, the applications that end users can build and use on the Cello platform. Yes, the first one of these is the Cello Wallet, which is a first of an ecosystem of applications. And really the goal of it is to make sending currency as easy as sending a text message. And while this has been solved for fiat in terms of mobile money, when it comes to digital currency, this is really a first. I think the good part about it is because we are completely open source, developers can collaborate to build financial applications and services on the platform completely free of charge to empower people around the world. Applications that are being built right now on the platform range from easier cash transfer programs to peer-to-peer lending, to international remittances, to digital assets and wallets. The goal is for them to solve real-world problems standing in the way of people's ability to be financially included, to have access to affordable and appropriate financial tools. And this is a bit too lofty of a goal for anyone to do it on their own. And so one of the very initial initiatives of the team was to build and launch the Alliance for Prosperity, which is now at 100+ mission-aligned organizations with very different profiles, from technology providers, nonprofit, mobile wallets, in global investors who are building mobile-friendly financial tools on top of the Cello platform. And again, the goal is really to enable as many people as possible to use digital currencies, empowering them to really be to have access to financial tools that they need. Some of the actors that we work with, especially in the impact space, are Mercy Corps, Comene Foundation, Give Directly, and a number of others that have joined recently. We haven't yet announced it, so keep an eye on the Alliance website, and we'll offer some updates to that. One of the things that I particularly like about our Alliance is that it's very focused on use cases. It's not a number of people that sign sort of a paper and forget that this has happened. And what I wanted to talk, and Ekaterina has already very nicely previewed, is two of the use cases and the projects that we have been working with Alliance members. Going straight into one of them is, talking to our Alliance members. It's been very clear that we have about 2 billion people in the world that only have access to informal labor markets. And of them, if we're starting to look at the past year, about 80% have been affected in some form by lockdown measures. And you're looking at the folks who do not have social security. There's no social security net they can fall back on, who needs to be able to sell their goods in the market or sell foods on the streets of a city to be able to feed their own family. And so we find that, though, there are people that have skills, but they're not being met by the jobs that they have access to. We find that, currently online microwork marketplaces are really designed for folks who have access to a computer and the bank account. But at the same time, if we're looking at the other side of the work suppliers, the market need for AI training microtasks was $9 billion last year, an estimated 11 this year, and it's projected to double to reach $24 billion by 2023. And so what we thought was, how can we solve this? How can we, facilitate both the access to work and the access to the funds that people receive? And so in close partnership with one of the UN agencies, Appen, which is one of our partners, which is one of the biggest microwork providers, what we did was create a blockchain-based mobile microwork application that really aims to give anyone in the world with the basic smartphone opportunity to earn money from the safety of their home. The project builds on the momentum of the microwork industry with 2 innovations. One, the smartphone application, which now is able to reach the billions who do not have access to a computer, and in integrating a mobile-first digital currency that's pegged to the US dollar as a payments rail that reduces transaction costs and is able to reach places underserved by existing payments rail. This is really the first attempt of matching microwork with integrated micropayments in a way that is scalable, cheap, fast, and allowing users to cash out funds virtually without paying almost any fees or waiting to accumulate considerable amounts. We've run an initial pilot in Kenya early this year before lockdowns, quite successfully. And one of the things that you find, and you'll see on the slide, is if you think of as $5, that can be sort of the amount that somebody earns by working a day on the platform, completing different type of micro tasks. They have about 10 levels of difficulty. And $5 can support a family throughout the better part of a week in most places in Kenya. However, prior to integrating both the microwork app with the digital currency ability to transfer funds, they needed to wait until they accumulated much larger amounts because of the fees that they had to pay. If you just compare the type of fees, you'll see that with providers as Western Union, because they have to go through so many other steps, for $5, you'd actually be paying 113% to be able to transfer that amount. But utilizing the platform and the microwork integration in the wallet, then you pay a 0.2%, and it's so much faster. And right now we are actually in the process of scaling up with 2 international NGOs and one of the UN agencies in Eastern Africa. This solution, and we're very excited about it. And I think it's one of my biggest regrets is that we weren't 2 years early on it to be able to provide the solution during the lockdowns.
Quick interjection. We have around 5 minutes left for the pacing of it.
Great.
So you have still give.
Yes. Thank you. I'm probably going to go through it faster than that. The second one that I wanted to talk about, and has been touched already, by different other panelists is, social transfers. Every country in the world has at least 5 to 10 types of government social transfers, whether it's social security, pensions, conditional cash transfers for vaccination or education. But only 3/4 of that is estimated to reach intended recipients, and that is an estimation that the UN itself makes. That is caused both by institutional fraud, ghost users, and simply just wastages around the way. And you also find that in a lot of cases, the paperwork and the time to show that you're compliant with the rules of the program can actually lead people to drop out of programs because it takes too much of their time. And so one of the things that you're able to do with blockchain is not only take advantage of that transparency and traceability of transactions that is quite unlike any other way of transferring and being able to audit transactions, but you're actually able to program money. You're able to add attributes on top of funds. And for example, one of the projects currently running with our alliance partners is taking place in the Philippines with the Grameen Foundations, where female-headed households are receiving vouchers. The use of vouchers is limited to food and cleaning supplies as a way of COVID relief. And so normally you would see institutions needing to print out vouchers, to make agreements with merchants, to figure out how to buy back and pay back the merchants for the use of the vouchers. But with programmable funds on blockchain, all you need to do is program the funds in a way that can only be redeemed for that particular type of goods and services that the program covers, and send it to your mobile phone, and the people can automatically go to the merchant, scan a QR code, redeem the funds, and then the moment that the funds reach the wallet of the merchant, it's free of restrictions, right? All that back cycle of redeeming funds, making sure that you get reimbursed by either the government or the NGO that distributes these programs and vouchers is being saved. This has applications for all types of financial transactions and social payments from the public sector. And the beauty of it is it's completely auditable and transparent on the blockchain. Right now, the program covers, I think, 3,500 households, and we're hoping it to grow it. And with that, I think I'm within this moment.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I love it, as I'm sure everyone has. We'll make sure to stay in touch and exchange our contacts for future collaboration opportunities, and we'll make sure to continue striving for prosperity and regenerative economy collectively. Thank you all for participating, and it was my honor to talk with you tonight. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.